Okay, so now let's look at finding solutions for cosine. So here when we solve in degrees, right, we do x is equal to inverse cosine of 0.6428, and when we punch that into our calculator, round it to the nearest degree, our calculator gives us 50. And so we draw our picture, and our answer is in quadrant 1, and that's a 50-degree angle. Well, we know that cosine is also positive here in quadrant 4, and so we find this angle, and that angle is 360 minus 50, which is 310, right? And so x is equal to 50 degrees or 310 degrees. Now let's do this in radians. It's exactly the same procedure, except instead of 360, you use 2 pi. But we type in, once our calculator is in radian mode, we type in inverse cosine of 0.6428, and our calculator gives us 0.87 rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay, and 0.87 radians is in the first quadrant, so that's 0.87 radians. And we know from our picture above, and we know just because we know that cosine is positive in quadrants 1 and 4, that we have another solution down here. And that solution is 2 pi minus 0.87. Right, instead of 360, we use 2 pi minus the first value that we found, and that is 5.41 radians. That makes sense because we're in quadrant 4. So in radians, x is equal to 0.87 or 5.41 radians. Okay, let's look at a negative value of cosine now. Cosine's nice because you don't have to find any coterminal angles, unlike sine and tangent. So we just type this in. If you type in x is equal to inverse cosine of negative 0.5736, you get 125 degrees. That makes sense, right? Because we're in quadrant 2. So 125 degrees is this way, okay? And so what we need to do is we need to find this angle down here. So the way we've been doing in class is that we found the supplement, right? We found that this is 180 minus 125, and then we added it to 180. Now here's another way of thinking about how to get to here. Well, if you can just imagine, if you flip this 125 degree angle over, isn't this 125 degrees in magnitude, right? And that still gets you to here. So another way you can get to this angle here is 360 minus 125 to give us 235, right? The other way that you could have done it is you could have done 180 minus 125, and let me punch that into my calculator because I can't do that in my head so well. And I want to get this right. So that's 55 degrees, right? So we know that this is 55 degrees, and this is 55 degrees. So to get to here, that's 180 plus 55, which is also 235. So the problem with that is that we have to do 2 separate calculations, right? First we had to find the 55, and then we had to add it to 180. So a new way that we want to think about it is that it's 360 minus this 125 to get us our 235. So x is equal to 125 or 235. The reason why I do that is going to be slightly easier when you're in radians to find that second angle. Okay, so like before, we find inverse cosine in radian mode of negative 0.5736, and my calculator tells me that that is 2.18 radians. And that puts us over here in quadrant 2, so that's 2.18 radians. Well, in order to find this one down here, instead of 360, we're going to do 2 pi. We're going to do 2 pi minus 2.18 radians, and that gives us 4.10 radians. And that makes sense that we're in quadrant 3. So x is equal to 2.18 or 4.10 radians. Alright, I know this video is going to be kind of long, but I'm going to run through tangent next. Okay. Alright, so now we're on to tangent. And again, we first punch this in. We're in degree mode right now in the first problem. So x is equal to inverse tan 0.7002. And my calculator tells me that that is 35 degrees. So I draw my picture here. I'm in quadrant 1, right? This is 35 degrees. Well, how do I get my second angle? Well, tangent is the slope, so I need to get down here. So my second angle is just 180 plus 35, right? And that is 215. So x is equal to 35 or 215. Okay, let's do the radians. So x is equal to inverse tan of 0.7002, and that gives me 0.61 radians. Again, that's in the first quadrant, right? Picture looks exactly the same. That's my 0.61 radians. How am I going to get to here? Well, instead of adding the 0.61 to 180, I'm going to add it to pi. So pi plus 0.61 radians is 3.75 radians, and that is definitely in quadrant 3. So in radians, x is equal to 0.61 or 3.75 radians. And of course, this wouldn't be complete if we didn't do a negative value for tangent, okay? Because like sine, you're going to have to find a positive coterminal angle here. So x is equal to inverse tan of negative sorry, I always mess this up, negative 5.6713, and my calculator tells me that that is negative 80 degrees. So where's negative 80? That's down here in quadrant 3. Sorry, quadrant 4, right? That's negative 80. So to get the positive coterminal angle, what I need to do is I need to do 360 plus a negative 80, 360 minus 80, and that gets me to 270, right? No, that's not right. 360 minus 80. That's 280. Okay. That's 280. I just want to make sure I get that right. Oops. 280. Okay. Now, how do I get my second angle? Well, remember that tangent, right? To get the next tangent value, you either add or subtract 180 from it. Okay? And so, you do 280 minus 180 to get your second angle, and that's 100 degrees. So x is equal to 100 degrees or 180 degrees. Sorry, not 180, 280. Back. Alright. Alright, 280 is down here. 100 is up there. Alright, let's do this in radians. So x is equal to inverse tan of negative 5.6713. Punched into my calculator when it is radian mode, and I get negative 1.4. So that tells me that I am down here, right? That's negative 1.4 radians. Well, what did I do first? I added 360 degrees to that. So I do 2 pi plus a negative 1.4 radians, and that gives me 4.89 radians. Right, so the positive coterminal angle here. Now, how do I get the second one? Well, from here, I just subtract out pi, right? Instead of 180 degrees. So I do 4.89 minus pi, and that gives me 1.75. And that makes sense because that's in quadrant 2. So x is equal to 1.75 or 4.89 radians. Okay. So that's how you find second angles in radians for sine, cosine, and tangent. And now here's your video homework. You're going to do the same thing where you're going to find all solutions for x between 0 and 2 pi. I'd like to see you round your answers to 2 decimal places because we're in radians, and draw pictures. So solve these 3 equations. We have one for sine, one for cosine, and one for tangent. This is your video homework. Turn this in with your other book homework at the next class period.